This podcast is brought to you by Reynolds and Reynolds, the industry leader in automotive technology. Learn how Spark AI, Reynolds' unified AI data layer, can help you unlock your full potential by visiting rey.com/spark-AI. That's REY.com/spark-AI.
Welcome to Daily Drive for Thursday, April 24th, 2025. I'm Jamie Butters, Executive Editor of Automotive News here in Detroit.
And I'm Kellen Walker in Las Vegas. Today on the show, Nissan stares in the face of a possible $5.3 billion net loss. Hyundai shifts some Mexican production to the U.S., and VW teams up with Uber to launch driverless ride-hailing in the U.S. Plus, Tesla's sales and earnings have been plummeting so far in 2025. Our own Lawrence Iliff joins the show to talk about what's happening and whether the EV leader can turn the ship around.
Either you believe it or you don't, right? Either they're going to crack it or not.
Let's run through all the news you need to know to keep up in the auto industry.
Nissan warns it will post a net loss of as much as 750 billion yen or $5.3 billion for the fiscal year that ended in March. That would be a record annual deficit. With an aging lineup, Nissan has been discounting its cars in order to avoid building up too much inventory, which is eroding profits. On average, analysts were projecting a loss of 112 billion yen, which itself was worse than Nissan's prior outlook for a deficit of 80 billion yen. Meanwhile, Nissan is ditching plans to bring two U.S.-made electric sedans to market. Instead, it will build a new unidentified EV at its Canton, Mississippi factory. According to an April 21st memo to suppliers reviewed by Automotive News, Nissan is also reconsidering the development schedule of two battery-powered crossovers.
Hyundai has launched a task force to respond to U.S. tariffs. It will try to minimize the impact of the duties on the Korean automakers' finances and will craft plans to increase local sourcing of car components in the U.S. Hyundai says it has already decided to shift production of some Tucson crossovers from Mexico to the U.S. as part of its response. The company is also considering whether to move production of some U.S.-bound cars from South Korea to other locations. Hyundai Motor reported a 2% rise in first quarter operating profit and reaffirmed its annual earnings targets.
Volkswagen Group of America and Uber Technologies are partnering to deploy thousands of autonomous ID Buzz vans in U.S. markets over the next decade. VW expects testing to begin this year with the first commercial launch slated for Los Angeles in 2026. During the initial testing and launch phases, VW said human operators will be on board the autonomous vans to refine technology and ensure safety. VW plans for the fleet of all-electric, fully autonomous ID Buzz vehicles to grow into the thousands over the next decade.
And Volvo has a new chief financial officer. The Swedish automaker has appointed Fredrik Hansson as its new CFO effective immediately. It's the latest change to the automaker's management since Volvo unexpectedly brought back former CEO Håkan Samuelsson last month to head the group for the next 2 years. Hansson has been the group's deputy CFO since 2023. Volvo says he takes the job on the same day that former CFO Johan Ekdahl was leaving the company. Ekdahl had held the position since 2022. And those are today's headlines. So, Jamie, Nissan expects to post a net loss of $5.3 billion for the fiscal year that ended in March. Do you think it's time for them to stop the discounting since it's eroding profits?
Well, yes. I mean, it's a tough push and pull, right? They've had some challenges. They really needed to get some vehicles off their dealers' lots. They needed to keep some inventory moving. So there was a need to discount earlier in the quarter. But of course, now we're at a point where tariffs are kicking in and, inventory might start to become a little more scarce. So I believe Nissan is already pulling back on their incentives. I believe they'll continue to do so. But it's very challenging. You've been doing this for a few years, Kel, and as companies, profit falls, you're always asking, is this a bad sign? And I say, well, they're still making money. and profit is profit, and you can always live with profit. $5 billion losses, that's a real loss. And that's the kind of thing that comes with a major restructuring. And that's what Nissan's really heading for. Big challenge for Espinosa to find a path to get the company profitable again so that they can be an attractive partner for, Honda or Foxconn or whoever.
Gotcha. Coming up, our own Lawrence Iliff joins the show to talk about Tesla's declining sales and earnings. That's next on Daily Drive.
As your business gets more complex, it feels like productivity can't go any higher. You need a way to move forward to a future where you don't have to start every interaction from scratch. You don't have to search for actionable information. You don't have to manually pull data to make decisions. You need a future where the complex is made simple and you can do more with less. How do you get there? It all starts with a spark. Unlock your full potential with the next generation of automotive dealership technology that actually does some of the heavy lifting for you by texting leads, transcribing calls, making data-backed recommendations, and boosting your overall productivity so that you can spend your time and energy on what truly matters, selling cars and growing your business. Spark AI, Reynolds' unified AI data layer, can empower your dealership to operate more efficiently and effectively than ever before, so you can do more, sell more, and make more. To learn how Spark AI can help your dealership reach its full potential, visit rayrey.com/spark-AI today. That's REYREY.com/spark-AI to learn more.
Welcome back to Daily Drive. I'm Jamie Butters with Kellen Walker. Tesla's first quarter net income fell 71% year over year. It's the latest piece of bad news for the U.S. EV leader and its fans. But Wall Street doesn't seem to be losing its faith in the future of the company. Lawrence Iliff covers Tesla and a number of other EV companies for us at Automotive News. He joins me now from his home office in Silicon Valley. Lonnie Iliff, welcome back to Daily Drive.
It's great to be here.
Tesla's first quarter earnings came out this week. Not a great quarter. Was it a step back or is this a downward turn for the company?
Well, I think it's really interesting what's going on. There's kind of like two companies here, right? And the automotive company is the one where we saw, a big decline in the numbers for the first quarter, right? So global deliveries were down 13%. Let's see, net income goes down 71% to 409 million with an M. Usually their net profit has a B. And automotive income, right, from automotive sales and credits are in there too. But even if you take the credits out, that's down about 20% to the lowest level since the third quarter of 2022. Energy was up. Energy helped them. The sale of emissions credits helped them. If they didn't have those, they would have posted a net loss. Just the loss of emissions would have net loss. So if you look at like the automotive numbers, if you treat this like an automotive company, the numbers were not good, but the stock held up because people still believe, or a lot of investors still believe, that this is an AI robotics company, not an automotive company, and that the automotive side will just provide the autos for a much bigger operation, which is robotaxis.
All right, we'll get back to that a little later. I want to dig in a little more on the emissions credits. Like you said, if they didn't have those, they would have had a net loss. And I guess I'm wondering, especially what we've seen, the declining sales in Europe as well as the US, that is there a risk that Tesla won't have enough credits to sell and keep that number up?
Yeah, right. Because the less cars you sell, the less credits you get. And then also, I think, particularly in Europe, I think the US is kind of behind on this, but particularly in Europe, some of the automakers are doing better making their own EVs and making their own vehicles, so they wouldn't require that much emissions credits. But it's really surprising how well those emissions credits have held up. It just shows that, the rest of the industry, is not making enough zero emission vehicles or is not meeting, the requirements, and they have to buy those. But sure, less cars, less emissions credits.
Well, it'll be curious to see how it plays out in the US, as I think a lot of automakers are feeling less pressure to produce EVs. And so there may be more buyers for the few credits that are out there, which would drive the prices up. So it's always a lot of things moving around in Tesla's world.
Absolutely.
So CEO Elon Musk has become an unusually politically active auto CEO, particularly in the U.S. With his affiliation with President Trump and his work with the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, but also in Germany. It's been very controversial and arguably quite damaging to the brand. But he said on the call he's looking to dial back the time he spends in Washington. Is that going to get Tesla back on track?
Well, analysts really liked this, right? Because it shows like a concrete step of him, kind of pulling back because a lot of what he's done seems to be escalating, right? When you look on his X feed, the things he's talking about, you know, calling, Democrats the party of hate or, some other comments that are like very divisive. It seems like, every day, I think maybe a few weeks ago he's posting 100 times a day and stuff, and some of it's really controversial, social issues, political issues. And so I think that the analysts really like this because it kind of shows at least a step. He's taking a step back from being super controversial. But I think the thing that maybe they're underestimating, maybe not, they're probably smarter than me, but is that he still owns X and he's still constantly pumping out stuff. And that his association with Trump, who's putting, tariffs on China and Germany and stuff like that. And there was some commentary in the earnings call about hostility toward the brand. And Elon Musk said that, they're paid protesters, which probably, will make them, a little more upset. But I think at least symbolically, it's a step back. Maybe he'll get refocused. He's got the robo taxis. He's got the humanoid robots. We'll talk about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the paid protester thing, I don't know if there could be one or two, but we know people who have gone to these protests. They're there because they disagree with Elon Musk and his political activities.
Yeah, and I've been, and I mean, people seem very passionate and people seem to be able to articulate why they're there, at least the ones I talk to.
Okay, so back to the call and the future of the company. Tesla reiterated that a more affordable model is coming soon. Maybe not as ambitious as the Model 2 we had kind of been led to dream about a couple years ago. But it seems like for investors, Tesla's really become an AI, robotics, and robotaxi play. What's the view on that?
I think from reading tons of commentary about this, either you believe or you don't. And if you believe, then this is what Elon Musk says. He says, starting in June, they will have a pilot project with a robo-taxi service, autonomous cars, and that will expand, right? They'll work out the kinks and everything.
That's
And
starting in Austin, Texas?
Austin, Texas, right? And then in California, it looks like it's just taking a little time, but they're also planning for it. And then kind of once they figure it out, right, it will expand to more markets and more markets and more markets. And he calls it a generalized solution, right? So it doesn't require maps, doesn't require, kind of LiDAR and some other sensors. This is a camera and a computer and a car. And it's going to do all that stuff. And then once he figures out the US, right, you go to other Europe, and then you figure out Europe, a generalized solution, AI, it all figures it out, and then China, and then you have this, massive thing, and people won't buy cars. They'll just, go around for 10 cents a mile. I'm making that up, but some number like that.
Right. Some very affordable number.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of the future. And he said that beginning late next year, it would have a noticeable impact. He said, move the needle in terms of Tesla earnings.
It's such an interesting approach. Like you said, for one thing, still he maintains, no LiDAR, just cameras, but the whole generalized approach, right? I mean, that is sort of the ultimate vision. The ultimate ideal is you create a bot that is as smart as a human or better and can just kind of figure out how to drive wherever they are. But whether it was, Argo AI when it existed as a Ford VW, program, Waymo, Cruise when GM had that. I mean, they've all done very localized programs because they say it's just so hard to get all the details right. Why does Tesla think that they've got it figured out and can master the whole of the U.S. at once?
AI, compute power. They have a massive room full of, computers. They're spending many, many, many billions on this. The idea is that with, the best programmers and the biggest computers and the most power, right, that they are going to solve it. And they're going to solve it that it's so good that it could figure out, snow and rain and adjust, and it could figure out construction and all types of things. Whereas, the Waymo approach, obviously they do use AI for part of it, but then they stitch it together with, regular types of programming to fix, this situation didn't go well, let's go in there and fix it. But Tesla wants to do it all through end-to-end AI. And it's one of those things, it's either you believe or you don't, right? Is that, either they're going to crack it or not. And from me watching lots and lots and lots of videos, which people are using Tesla software, full self-driving, a lot of people will have an hour-long drive and never have to intervene. And some people can't go down the street to the 7-Eleven without it making 2 or 3 mistakes, running a stop sign or getting in the wrong lane to turn or whatever. And so it's going to be absolutely fascinating to see what the final product looks like. Maybe they have a version of full self-driving that they haven't released to the public that's mind-blowing.
But they will have, like Waymo does, a remote control sort of option, or at least, a help button if the car hopefully doesn't run stop signs, because that can get really dangerous. But if it's otherwise confused and paralyzed, that you can hit a button and someone can look in and help diagnose the situation and get the car out of trouble.
Yeah, one situation where I've seen, and Elon Musk kind of disputes this, but is the idea that in direct sunlight, right? You have direct sunlight, like if you're driving and you're blind and you have to put on sunglasses or kind of crank your head so that you can see where you're going, is that the car will give up. It will say, I can't do this. And so maybe that's a situation where they intervene. We've seen with Waymo, they'll get stuck in like a circle. They'll be like driving around in the same thing and they can't figure out the exit to, a parking lot or a loading dock or something where they got stuck. And so they would go in. They said that they would go in with the remote drive. But otherwise, right, they said that the cars are not going to be remotely driven. That's a situation where you have to intervene.
All right. Well, like you said, it's going to be fascinating to see how this plays out. I hope that nobody gets hurt. And Lonnie Iliff covers EVs for us from Silicon Valley. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Great to be here.
That's Daily Drive for today. I'm Jamie Butters.
And I'm Kellen Walker. Thanks to Automotive News executive producer Jake Neer, as well as our own Urvash Kakaria and David Phillips for their reporting for today's podcast. You can get the latest news on earnings, manufacturing, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com.
Come back tomorrow for a conversation with Protective Asset Protections' Paul McCarthy on the different ways tariffs could affect dealership F&I.
Obviously, with vehicle prices being impacted, I think one of the key areas the dealers are going to have to look at is inventory management.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoy the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.